The video that this was extracted, which is a few hours long, along with the actual explanatory statement, is on the website. When we learn, we once more become a child. And just like a child that learns to walk by first crawling and falling and then feeling some pain, if that said child, every time he or she falls in an act of trying to stand and walk, if that child was reprimanded and punished, that child will never learn to walk. Therefore, this gift of verbal communication that we have to change each other's lives, because all it takes is just a conversation to change someone's life. This gift that we have when we exchange it with one another, and a fault in a manner of walking in a certain given knowledge base is pointed out. Don't perceive that fault that's been pointed out as a reprimand or punishment, because that creates a blockade in the mind which prevents one from being able to properly walk in that very specific avenue of life. Take any words that's been given that points out some things that are not complete or wrong. Take those caveats and alarm and clarity as a point to get stronger, to get better at what you're doing, so that you could then appropriately pass it on to someone else so that they will not make that same mistake, rather than taking it as a form of verbal punishment or reprimand. It is necessary to point these incorrect things out to people in the process of showing the proper one, so that as the mind is absorbing the proper way, it knows clearly without any dispute that there is a corresponding end that is one way or another. Someone very wise once told me that wherever you see something that is fake or artificial, or something that's synthetic, a similitude, but not quite the original, but not quite the complete truth, wherever that fake thing is, know that it would always be in abundance. But despite that fake thing or that similitude being in abundance, that fake can only exist because it has its origin in something real. And that something real will be scarce. That something real will be uncommon. That something fake that came out of that something true will be that which is more popularly known. But make no mistake, where there's a fake or a similitude of something that's not real, know that that fake has its origin in something that's real. And all you have to do is simply seek it, and you will find it. If one only learns the right way, they may only presume what the wrong way is. But if one learns the right way, and the wrong way is also clarified as the right one is being shown, they have both sides of the pillar now strongly built to uphold whatever structure that they have going on, whatever given degree of knowledge or aspect of life. All right, it's about time. This video is going to speak about a lot of things that requires a lot of attention to details. The manner most people have learned to do their passport is very limited. I'm going to reveal all that and break it into pieces. Along with many other things, some of the things that will be entertained is how you can actually add your new spiritual name or whatever name you want outside of what's colloquially known as sens legis, if you've yet to do the from a court order name change. And for some people, it might be based on marriage, etc., etc. We'll go into the public acts. We'll go into the statutized version of why certain things are done. We'll entertain the manner of putting zeros in the Social Security, and the caveat that a good amount, about 95% of people don't know as to how to make the zeros and relating to the Social Security number and filling out the DS11, how to make it work and why it doesn't work, and the misconception of state citizenship and all those things people carry around in their minds, along with a lot more information. It's going to be a few hours because it's worth it. But first, what you must know about the importance of passports and why certain verbiage exists within that explanatory statement regarding the Articles of Association and Articles of Confederation. American consular officials issued passports to some citizens of some of the 13 states, some, not all, during the American Revolutionary War, 1775 to 1783. 1777 is when the Article of Confederation was initially created. The Articles of Association prior to that. Passports were sheets of paper printed on one side, included a description of the bearer, and were valid for 3 to 6 months. The minister to France, Benjamin Franklin, based the design of passport issued by his mission on that of French passport. From 1776 to 1783. Keep note of these years, because what's being put in that explanatory statement that will be in the embedded metadata into the passport has a lot to do with the origin of the passport, to which you're carrying that principle alive and which reflects certain status. This is where the misconception comes in, where people say it's taking you back to state citizen, because passports were initially issued to some, not all, some members of the 13 states. So people feel like if you fill out a certain way, you're going back to state citizenship. That's not true. But in truth, when it comes to the issue of lack of federal jurisdiction compared to state, the core of that is the fact that when you present that birth certificate, the birth certificate is not a federal tool. Federal jurisdiction rents it from the county. So these are small misconceptions that people over-exaggerate. And even if it's taking one back into state citizenship, then what is the function and purpose of that? It does not get rid of court cases automatically. It does not do all the special things people claim it does. The fact that DS11 in that passport form is in fact a federal tool. When these passports were issued to some of the 13 states members, it is as a form of treaty where incorporation doctrine was taking place, whereby state jurisdiction decided to merge with federal jurisdiction. The existence of any given passport and whatever status comes with it is an evidence that state jurisdiction is merging with federal. Contrary to the contention people make when they say it's taking back to state citizenship. Even they cannot explain why they're claiming it's taking one back into state citizenship. But if you now want to separate certain jurisdiction, that's where the concept of non-citizen national comes in. Because non-citizen national is an evidence of lack of incorporation. Non-citizen national is an evidence of lack of incorporation. Non-citizen national is an evidence of lack of incorporation. We'll explain that. From 1776 to 1783, no state government, remember, they keep making mention of state government, because the entire issue of passport is based on two jurisdictions, state and federal. No state government had a passport requirement because they don't need it as an instrument. The Articles of Confederation government, 1783 to 1789, did not have a passport requirement. The Department of Foreign Affairs of the war period also issued passport, and the department, carried over by the Articles of Confederation government, continued to issue passport. So once upon a time, the government that was established by the Articles of Confederation, aka the United States of America. If you look at the style and the language of that Article of Confederation and the things written in the explanatory statement, for those you have it. And even if you don't have the explanatory statement, go read the Articles of Confederation. It tells you what the style of government is. It's the United States of America. If it was meant to be a state citizenship, then it would name it as the United States of Massachusetts states, United States of Connecticut, United States of Florida. Pay attention. America is an entire continent. So the Article of Confederation government once did not have a passport requirement, but upon certain departments, aka foreign department, now known as the Consular Affairs, or the liaisons of Department of State, once they begin to issue passport, it was then carried over, meaning it was merged into the Article of Confederation government, into the United States of America. So now state and federal had a treaty to say, okay, instead of fighting all these wars, American Revolutionary War, we'll now come together as a form of treaty. Now keep in mind, it qualified it as some, not all of them. Only some people agreed to that. These things are very easy to misconstrue by those who don't do their homework. If you're putting your information, your picture, any given thing on any form, and they're telling you these things are affidavit, all these forms are affidavits, DS11 or any other forms that will be showing, you have to know why you're doing it. You have to know the detail and the state of mind as a premise as to why they're doing what they're doing. You don't want to be throwing around some speculation. That speculation in the mind opens the door for them to look at you and want to basically step over you. It is a spiritual thing. And if there's any mild discrepancy, when you come right a certain way, they know, okay, never mind, you're right. These people have access to the internet and all these things. The internet was once a military tool that's been granted into the public for use. We went over the details of that on Patreon. All these things people are putting on the internet and website of state citizenship, they have access to it. They see it. They know there's a pocket of people speculating. I implore you to be that exception that's not speculating, but know the truth in its clear lens of why certain things exist a certain way. So now the United States of American government, called the Article of Confederation, solidified a treaty to now beginning to use the passport once the Department of Foreign Affairs, aka Department of State now, were created. The Department of Foreign Affairs of the war period also issued passport, and the department carried over, then it merged by the Article of Confederation government, aka United States of America, which people misconstrue as, quote, state citizen. It's not a state citizenship. Continue to issue passports. So now the federal and the state have a treaty. In July 1789, the Department of Foreign Affairs was carried over by the government established under the Constitution. 1789 was when the United States Constitution began and was finally ratified in 1791. The Article of Confederation is the predecessor to the United States Constitution that was later ratified in 1791. In September of that year, the name of the department was changed to Department of State. You see, Department of Foreign Affairs was changed to Department of State. The department handled foreign relations and issued passport, and until the mid-19th century had various domestic duties. Article of Association is what evolved to Article of Confederation. Article of Confederation is what evolved into what we now know as the United States Constitution. Initiated in 1789, ratified in 1791. It's a continuation of the same thing. The question is, how do you evoke certain jurisdictions and certain protection? Because the existence of a new law that evolved does not annul the old one. Because if the old one was annulled, then the existence of the new one is subsequently annulled also, because that's its origin. The issue is most people don't know to evoke certain rights. For decades thereafter, passports were issued not only by the Department of State, but also by states and cities and by notary public. Some of the forms we're going to be going over here that you can add when it comes to name change, if you get to do a form of court order name change, you can just do it in the form of notary publics. Now the question is, well, if passports were once issued by each state and by each city, which municipality, why then is it only that it's only issued by a federal agency now? Good question. And if you get to ask it, that's an important question you should ask, because that plays a huge role as to why that DS-11 has been filled out. I'm not just going to throw the form in front of you and say, fill it out this way, fill it out that way. I'm going to show you the reason why it's being done and how it led to that way. Because believe it or not, filling out the form itself is the least important part. Why you're filling it out and how it is being filled out a certain way. It's the core. The form itself is just a summary of something that precedes it. For example, an internal passport dated 1815 was presented to Massachusetts citizen George Barker to allow him to travel as a free black man to visit relatives in southern slave states. These people are giving you this example of being free and being able to travel, ingress and regress related to slave issues, because the same still applies in today's world, much more perfected manner. And they're giving you this example as a direction that this passport has a significance when it comes to status. These people are not making these examples by mistake. And again, for reference, for those who say Wikipedia is not reliable, these people give you reference. It's always here at the bottom, from books, from documentaries, from journals, from congressional records, all of that. For example, an internal passport, meaning it's issued by a city or a state rather than the Department of State, aka Department of Foreign Affairs. An internal passport dated 1815 was presented to Massachusetts citizen Gregory Barker to allow him to travel as a free black man to visit relatives in southern slave states. Passports issued by American authorities other than the Department of State breached propriety and caused confusion abroad, meaning international relations. Meaning there was not a unified state of mind as to how certain things will work, and it was confusing other body politic in other nation states as to what people's status were. So now you see the flaw in people saying it takes you back to being a state citizen, because that's not the issue, and that's not the power of the passport and non-citizen national status within it. Some European countries refuse to recognize passports not issued by the Department of State unless United States consular officials endorse them. The problem led the Congress in 1856 to give the Department of State the sole authority to issue passport. In other words, a consular officials on the United States level is endorsing a passport. Every time you look at that passport and you look at that UV light and all those seals in the background, that's their endorsement for international purpose. What are they endorsing? What they're endorsing is how you fill out that passport, which is the core and the importance. See, the Department of State is not giving you anything. They're simply endorsing the status that you present to them. This is extremely important as a state of mind and a cause as to why the DS-11 is being filled out, or any other documents attached to it, such as a social security number declaration to say that you've never been issued a social security number and why you put in zeros, which people don't know they have to do that, and we'll show that. Such as the explanatory statement, which a lot of people know, but they don't even know why you're adding all those Article of Confederation, Article of Association details in it. Or any other forms that you fill out, like the DS-71 or DS-60, or affidavit of statement synonymous to those, to remove restrictions within those same form. All of that will be going over here. That is to say, to remove that deadbeat horse of it, the passport taking you back into state citizenship, that was dead long ago, back in 1856. It doesn't make you a state citizenship. Even before then, the intent was not to create any state citizenship. That passport, by way of the Department of Foreign Affairs, merging with the Article of Confederation government called the United States of America government, that merger was for the purpose of creating an internal treaty to reduce feud going on during the Revolutionary War. The intent was not to create any state citizenship or anything like that. And when you do fill out that DS-11, any subsequent document you send, all they are doing is simply endorsing what you have placed as your status. If you put your status as a quote state citizenship, none of that even exists. See, the state still has their own sovereign power to do whatever they want, but they never intend for state citizenship. Now, you can call yourself an Illinoisan, a New Yorker, a Floridian, according to the GPO style manual. Do that, because it shows your nativity, aka your domicile. But your mere presentation of your domicile that is going to be endorsed by the Department of State is not an acceptance that you're a state citizen. Believe it or not, all these benefits that people are enjoying are not even state related. And when it comes to state related benefits, most don't even know how trust works, how situs works, how safe havens work, how safe havens for firearm work, let alone how to even begin to work with that birth certificate, and then have the federal pay you some money. People are mixing and matching. Don't do the same. The problem led to Congress in 1856 to give the Department of State the sole authority to issue a passport. The issuance is by way of endorsing them. When that passport is filled out and you put all those information there, all they are doing is endorsing it that this guy is this way. And when people within that airport and type in the passport number or scan it, whether it's the card or the book version, whether it's the large book or the small one, depending on how often you travel, when they scan it or put that passport number, all that information comes up. And later down the line, I'll explain some of the advantages that I've experienced when it comes to going through lines and things like that, and how the Department of State have actually implemented certain programs. From 1789, aka the evolved version of Article of Association called the United States Constitution through late 1941. The constitutionally established government required passports of citizens only during two periods: during the American Civil War and during World War I. Then ingress and regress during time of emergency and war, back then up till 1941, mandated passports only during times of war. But now, after all these 1941 and all that, so many emergency acts such as the Patriot Act and the Trading with the Enemy Act has been passed, that there's now a perpetual state of war, and now the passport is required. And those things are on a federal level, and the form you fill out is a federal form. Every citizen is a national of the United States, but not every national is a citizen. Every citizen is a national of the United States, but not every national is a citizen. The only current example of non-citizen U.S. national are those born in American Samoa. Why is that? Because unlike other current U.S. territories, people born in American Samoa are not automatically granted U.S. citizenship by birth, as the territory is not incorporated. And an act of Congress granting it similar to the U.S. territories has not yet been passed for American Samoa. The status of non-citizen national exists because whatever territory is claimed is not incorporated. That is the core behind non-citizen national: lack of incorporation, aka 14th Amendment citizen. Do you see what's going on? This is what people loosely, who cannot think deeply, they stop in their thought process and say, oh, okay, that makes you a state citizen, then you claim state citizenship. That's not what's going on. Even if all 51 states or 52 states were not incorporated, they all still claim to be part of the United States of America. If that doesn't exist, then you're looking strictly at the primogenitures that were once in this land before the United States of America came into the equation. They didn't call themselves United States of America. They had their own scattered confederacies. So long as you're dealing with anything relating to the United States of America, you will be starting from the core and the root of it. And even if the core and the root was not incorporated, they still didn't refer to themselves as state citizens. They still refer to themselves as Americans. And they had a body politic as a treaty called the Article of Association and Article of Confederation to prevent them from being a slave to other people's control. There's no need to scatter things. There's no need to divide things. One must comprehend it from its true form. And that is under the assumption that if all the states were not incorporated. But most of them have been incorporated into the 14th Amendment. And the only one that hasn't been is American Samoa, hence the status of non-citizen national. So now this brings up the question, why are you going all the way back to Article of Confederation or Article of Association? Because that is the time period that existed before the 14th Amendment incorporation, and thus automatically grants you this ability of non-citizen national if you invoke those laws during those times, because they've not been annulled. And in fact, it affirms right of regress and ingress. That is the reason why the non-citizen national status is evoked automatically when you evoke Article of Association and Article of Confederation, because back then it is yet to be incorporated. In modern time, if one were to not evoke those existing laws and you were to just go along with the flow, you can only be a non-citizen national if you're an American Samoa. That's what they recognize, identify by operation of law. But one thing they will not publicly tell you is also that by operation of law, the core of what made the United States as they know it were the Article of Association and Article of Confederation. And back then, they were not incorporated. The same principle that causes American Samoans to be a non-citizen national, which is lack of incorporation, it's the same principle that existed during the United States of American government called Article of Association and Article of Confederation. Do you see what's going on? The best part is you can evoke that status of not being incorporated as a 14th Amendment citizen and still claim nativity and nationality and bloodline. That is the power of that explanatory statement. You must know these things. 95% of people who claim to have done the non-citizen national, federal injunction, state citizenship, so and so, they do not know these things. That is the reason why we're making this a premise to these few hour-long videos. This is probably the longest video I have ever done. And I deliberately took the time to sit down and do this because you must know this. My presumption in the past was once that people knew these things. But the more I see people speak of certain things, the more I read certain things, the more I realize people don't know these things. So now I have to reverse all the way back and introduce these foundational principles, because whoever introduced all these half information to them, whether or not they knew it, I don't know. I'm not in their mind. But the truth remains is by the time that information is finalized in their mind, they only received about 40 to 50% of the truth. And people are going about speculating. Speculation might be good for the stock market if you're trying to make some money when the market is going down. But when it comes to real life circumstance and you're signing things, you're putting your image, it's best that you don't speculate. Listen to this. The other historical, and we're just going to put this out here towards the end of what we're telling you about non-citizen nationals. And we're going to use the term historical. Even though we clearly mentioned article association here, we clearly mentioned how it evolved and how things merged. We're not going to use those words anymore. We're just going to say historical. Other historical groups of non-citizens, U.S. national, includes those of former U.S. territories and during periods of time before the act of Congress granted citizenship to those burning current territories. They're telling you you can go back to a former government that once existed that's still active right now and it's running parallel side by side with the current one because it is the one that gave birth to the current one. And you can claim that status and nothing is stopping you. And they just ended there. They stopped. And then they divert it into something far removed. Say, hey, see African refugees, stateless people. And by the way, stateless people, they apply for non-citizen nationals if they don't have any claim to the land itself. And what they do is a separate certificate, like a certificate of naturalization is issued to people. They issue a certificate of non-citizen national. But if you already have ties to the land through nativity or bloodline, just solely or just sanguine, that certificate is embedded by way of what you present to them, which they endorse by putting it as a metadata into that thing that you hold called the passport card or the passport book.